All right. Good evening, everyone. It's 5:30. I see people are still kind of popping in, but I think we have a quorum, and maybe be a good time to get started with the roll call. So I will turn it over to Edgar to get that started.
Confirming everyone can hear me. Excellent. Solange Ullman.
Looks like she's in the attendees.
Indeed.
list.
Yep.
Yeah.
Solange, we're trying to promote you now. Excellent. So I see that she's on. Aaron Anguiano. Don't see him on just yet. Leah Ashford.
Leah's going to be joining us a few minutes late, I believe.
Josh Bridegroom. Wendy Bird. Trish Christensen.
Here.
Darius Crosby. Sheriff Dirksey. Birgit Flatiger. Teresa Gamboa.
Here.
Johnny Garcia.
Here.
Jonathan Grammatico. Austin Grant.
Present.
Brad Hahn.
Here.
Tom Helm.
Here.
Ruben Imperial. Not seeing Ruben. Jennifer Jennison.
Present.
Will Kelly. Of course.
Here.
you're here. Marianne Martino. Seeing you here.
Here.
Matthew Mason. Linda Mayo. And I see that you're here, Linda, but it appears you're on mute. But I got you.
Here.
Perfecto Munoz. Alvaro Ramirez. Nico Solorio.
Here.
Dan Starr.
Present.
Aaron Tate.
Present.
And Tim Zierli. And
All right.
said Tim was not going to be here, so back over to you, Will.
Thanks, Edgar. And I believe next we have an announcement about Spanish interpretation for anyone who requires it. Now it looks like Kate's putting up a slide. And Octavio, if you're ready to make that announcement, go ahead.
Sí, claro, para cualquier persona que se encuentre con nosotros y que requiera una interpretación simultánea en español, con todo gusto, nada más presione el botón que dice español en su pantalla y yo voy a estar traduciendo todo lo que se diga en la reunión.
All right, thank you. And there is the interpretation button for anyone who needs it. All right, well, thank you all for joining us for what will hopefully be our last purely virtual meeting. We're no one can say for sure these days, but we're fully expecting to be back in our kind of hybrid format next month on the 23rd. So thank you again for showing up and bearing with us as we do this over Zoom. This is, so here are our intentions for the meeting. Many of us participated in the forced option simulation scenario training with MPD. So we have Chris Adams here to walk us through a little bit of a debrief of that experience and be some space for us to share our impressions and what we took away from that experience. And then we have, for the first time, really bringing back substantive feedback from the ad hoc groups. So as you are all aware, we've been given kind of 3 areas of focus: policies and procedures, alternate response, and accountability. And we've been doing work in subgroups and ad hoc groups to dig deeper into those policy areas. We're going to hear in some detail from the policies and procedures and alternate response ad hoc groups tonight. We're going to hear a very, very brief update from the accountability group, and we'll hear more substantive information in March, since that group started a little later than the other ones. So this is really important. Important to emphasize, nothing is final yet. This is, as these groups kind of progress in their work, seemed like a good opportunity to, and actually, Kate, stay back on the other slide for just one moment. Good opportunity for these groups to give kind of a snapshot of where they're at, get feedback from the rest of the group, get whatever input other work group members have, so that no committee goes too far down one path without getting that feedback. So really important to hear from folks either right now in the meeting, or feel free to jot down notes or questions or comments and email them to the appropriate person afterwards. But we'd love to have as much interactive discussion as we can over Zoom like this. After this meeting, those 2 ad hoc groups, policies and procedures and alternate response, will very likely start actually drafting their recommendations. So now is a really important time to give feedback before that begins. And I'll also mention, just to follow up on discussions about transparency from earlier, the meeting minutes are now posted on the Forward Together website under documents and presentation. You can find the meeting minutes for the ad hoc groups. There's a few that are still being typed up, but they are being posted as they're available. And then, so after we have those discussions and we hear from the rest of the work group and from the public, we'll have a conversation, as we always do, about our next steps and align on where we go from here. Thank you. Yes, so here is the schedule. So we will, let's see, we will get into the, I guess the debrief of the force option simulator isn't necessarily on there, but that's what will be happening before 6 o'clock. And then around 6 o'clock, we will start those updates and discussions, and then we'll hear from the public, and then we'll have that conversation about where we go from here. All right. And I think we're all familiar with Zoom by this point, but of course, let's be patient with each other, especially making sure there's space for people to weigh in and speak. It's not as easy to kind of catch people's attention over Zoom. Do feel free to use the raise hand button. That can be really helpful when you have something you want to say. Let's see, if you need to be renamed, let Scotty isn't here, but let us know one way or another. We're happy to rename you, but it looks like everyone's names are good. Gallery view is helpful, and I think Kate has a slide in a moment where she'll walk through that just so we can see each other's faces. Oh, there it is. Switching to gallery mode is always good. Remain muted when you aren't speaking. Video on is helpful, just so we can all see that we're all engaged and here together. And Zoom reactions are great. If you can't find the raise hand button, though, raising your hand on the screen is the next best thing. Very good. And on to the next slide. And as always, here are group agreements. So we'll just leave this up for folks to remind themselves. And I'll just say I'm really proud and encouraged of how we've embodied these agreements and how well we're working together. And if there are no other questions or comments or anything else, I think we're ready to get into our first agenda item. Yep, so I'll turn it over to Chris and Kate and Michael to walk us through this debrief.
Thank you, Will. Can everyone hear me? Okay, Kate, we can actually probably go to the next slide and we'll kind of talk through this. So again, if you've met me before, my name is Chris Adams, and I was fortunate to be part of the scenario and simulator experience that we had. We held 3 sessions to give an opportunity for committee members and also council members to be a part of this training. So I will start with some good news. Is earlier today, we were able and felt that it was important to offer a couple more days of this for those who missed it. So I will be sending those dates out to staff in order to get those dates to you guys, but we're looking at March 20th and 22nd as some additional days And we're flexible with that week, but we want to make sure that we give others an opportunity to go through these scenarios and simulator experiences that missed it. Understand everyone's very busy in scheduling, but we think it's important, and we'll make sure that we make that happen. So more info to come on that, but I'm excited that we're going to host at least 2 more days of that so people can experience it. But I do appreciate those who were able to make it out to the 3 days that we held, and able to meet our staff and go through these experiences. So my plan here is to just basically kind of remind the group, and then for those who didn't attend and for those in the public to know just very briefly what we did. Understanding that I know some committee members, I may be spoiling some of it when I talk about it, but hopefully if you participate in a month, you'll have forgotten at least some of this, so you don't remember the scenarios. But we did have the work group participate in some actual scenarios with role players that included a traffic stop scenario that had 3 different versions of it, an uncooperative driver, a shooting that took place, which you'll see, and then a scenario where a traffic stop was being conducted and some onlookers came to the traffic stop and were a little bit disruptive to that stop. There was also a scenario that was a proactive or a community complaint driven scenario where you're encountering a couple that's sitting in a van and drinking in public. And then lastly, we had several force option simulator scenarios that the group was able to go through. So I'll tell you that these were designed, and we spoke at length with the work groups on each of the days in a debriefing scenario, but we picked these particular scenarios because they're occurrences that we have experienced either here at this department or other departments. They're not some drafted up scenario that we're making up. It's actually things that have occurred, and it's actually things that we have trained our police officers in our different training days over the years. So particularly the proactive or community complaint van scenario was something that came from the Midwest, and we designed that scenario to be exactly like that. And the different outcomes of that was based off of how the officers, when they trained, performed in that. And that was the same thing that we did with the role players. We didn't come up with scenarios that were so outlandish and impossible to be successful in because we didn't think that was fair, and it's not practical for what I believe this group should be looking at. It should be the everyday encounters. While some of them could deteriorate into things that are not everyday encounters, it gave a good snapshot of what officers, I think, when we train, are thinking about that are the could happens and to be prepared for. But also balancing the fact that some of the outcomes are not common, and we have to balance knowing what could happen, but what really should happen. Whether you're doing a traffic stop on just somebody driving down the road that's trying to get to work and happen to be speeding, be able to talk to that person and be polite and respectful, but also knowing that there could be other outcomes to that and balancing that. So that's where we designed these scenarios from. I did in this PowerPoint, we'll go to the next slide, selected 3 different videos. Fortunately, we were able to equip those going through the scenario training, the members of the committee, with body-worn cameras, just like the officers wear. The hope of that was to get the feeling of what it's like to have that camera on, but also for an opportunity like this to go back and look at it. Some of the things as we went through, because there was tons of videos with all the participants in the different scenarios, we could spend all night looking at them, but selected 3 just to give you a quick snapshot and kind of a reminder. And then after we watch the videos, we will give an opportunity for the committee to kind of talk about their experience. But this is a good opportunity for those who weren't in participation to see what the scenarios look like in a brief snapshot, and then for the community to see as well what it was that the work group went through. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed the technology stays on our side here, and we'll just kind of click through these and watch them one by one.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. Can you lower the window, please?
I can't hear you.
Can you lower the window?
It's low enough. I can hear you now.
Well, I can't see your face. Can you lower the window, please?
Why do you need to see my face? I can talk to you fine, sir. I don't know. Can you tell me why I'm being stopped?
You've been stopped because you had tinted windows.
Okay, I have a note from my doctor.
Well, let me see your driver's license and registration, please.
Sir, why do you need to see my driver's license and registration? I thought you said this was because of my window thing.
So what? I want to see it.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
You need to show me that.
Show you what?
Your driver's license and registration.
Okay, but sir, okay. I don't understand why I'm being pulled over. I told you that I have a note from my doctor
Well,
for my window tint.
we'll find out about that. But let me see that first.
I don't have it on me.
No driver license and no registration?
Sir, I'm going to film this encounter. I think this is not a lawful encounter.
Yeah, you have the right to have your own opinion.
Okay,
Can you
just wanna
step
know-
out of the car, please?
What?
Step out of the car.
What? Well, how
You
did
need
this
to
go
step
from-
out.
Sir, why are you asking me to step
I
out
don't
of
know
the car?
who you are. I can't see you. You need to step out of the car, please.
Okay, how's that? You can see me better now?
Okay, and you
I
have
don't
no.
Okay, so with that particular scenario, as I mentioned earlier, that was a traffic stop with an uncooperative subject. Everybody ended up going through that scenario, sometimes spending 4 or 5 minutes to talk to this person, and some were successful in gaining compliance. But I think as we all watch it, it just gave that opportunity to see what someone that could be potentially uncooperative and talking through those and keeping a cool demeanor and being respectful as walking through there. So. And then we can jump to the next one. Before we hit play on that, so sorry about that, Kate. So with this one, I mentioned we did a traffic stop scenario. So the first scenario was them talking to this uncooperative subject. And then the prompt that we gave here was exactly the same scenario. You're pulling over a vehicle for tinted windows. You've already had some experience, what it's like to walk up to the vehicle, some very basic training of what that looks like. And now that's approaching the window on the exact same type of traffic stop.
Excuse me, can you roll down the window?
All right, go for it.
All right.
All right.
Did I get you? Did it go off? I think it may have.
Oh, you good?
Yep, I'm good. I'm
Okay,
good.
you good to go? Good to go green. Hold it down.
Yep.
So again, same information given to the role player in there, and obviously the outcome's different. While this outcome in this particular scenario is a very rare instance, but it's trained from things that have happened in the real world. So it gives the role players in this instance just another experience, another thing to think about in every single scenario that they're going through. And then we'll jump to our last one. This last scenario was what I had mentioned of the two-person approach on a proactive type stop. That is them dealing with a community complaint, something that is driven by whether it's a complaint to the city or the police department about ongoing issues in a particular area with drinking or people using drugs in public and things like that. So the next scenario is being proactive, trying to deal with this issue in a particular neighborhood complaint.
Well, let's see. How are you?
Oh, he's doing good too.
Okay. Well,
problem?
yeah, let's see. We got some calls from some neighbors. You're making the neighbors nervous.
Oh, that's too bad. I'll close the door though.
Okay. Do you have a license?
Yeah, I have a driver's
Is
license.
this your car?
Yeah. It's registered. Well, it's registered to my mom, but it's mine.
Okay. Can we see your license? Your registration?
Well, I didn't bring my license with me, but I'm not driving, so you don't really need to see my registration.
Well, who's driving today? You said this was your vehicle.
Yeah, I have a driver's license.
Well, we need to see your license. You need to have a
write
license.
it down. You have a radio. You can call it in.
Yeah, well, driving without a license is illegal.
Yeah, I have one though. I just don't have it with me.
Oh, well, that's not acceptable.
Oh, okay. Do you want us to leave?
Maybe. Would you mind stepping out of the car?
For what?
Just so we can have a conversation.
Oh, I can talk right here. My legs hurt. I've hurt my foot.
If you wouldn't mind, we'd prefer for you to step out of the car, please.
Did I do something wrong then?
No, not at all.
Just make us feel safer.
Oh, well, you guys have guns.
Well, we can't see that you don't.
Oh, no, I don't like guns. I don't have anything. I mean, but you both have guns.
Would you
That's
mind?
kind of scary to me.
Would you mind stepping outside so we can talk to you a little better?
I mean, I guess I can. I really don't want to.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, well, you want me over there? You want me over there?
Come over here.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Uh-oh.
Can I? We can get that. We can recycle it. Or do you guys want to pick it up?
What are you gonna do?
We're dead.
Go for it. Go for it. All right. Go and come on in. Hold down the button on your camera for 5 seconds. We'll shut that off.
That was not very nice.
And so that last particular scenario, as I mentioned, a proactive stop. And I'll tell you that we put our own officers through that particular scenario because it's something that happened in the real world. And the whole idea is that divided attention, someone that's distracting. And we have had people be successful in that to where the encounter did not deteriorate into that instance, particularly in some past groups that have gone through some of the scenario training. That's basically as long as you keep your focus on both people, because it's easy to get divided attention. So this is a 4-hour experience of getting through these scenarios. And then of course, as you guys as a group talk, don't forget about the piece where you also participated in a simulator experience where you had several different scenarios where you're trying to work through people in crisis. But it gave just a kind of a quick snapshot of what some of the training that we put our officers through on a monthly basis when we talk about different trainings out of briefings or our department training days, and constantly putting them through critical thinking skills, how to take every single scenario here and what are the opportunities for de-escalation, and how can we be respectful, but also be able to control these situations to where everybody involved in it, both community and officers, are safe. So I do appreciate everyone's participation that came, and I'm like I mentioned, we will get those dates out for those who weren't able to experience it coming forward. But I do want to turn it over to Kate and Michael to kind of facilitate what the overall group's feedback was, and anything that you found helpful.
You bet, Chris. Thanks. So yeah, we're going to take just a few minutes to allow the group to talk to each other about the experience. And before we just ask some very basic questions of you, which is just to describe your overall experience, but also, what kind of contribution is it making to your experience as a member of this work group? Both Mike and I spent some time with the 3 different groups that went through, and one of the messages we invited people to hear was, and that we continue to offer, is that if you could see yourselves in the role of being what I call a field scientist, right? Just trying to observe the experiences, the feelings, the conditions that are in place. Part of our interest in inviting you all to go through this experience was so that you could collect more data. It's just more information, in the same way we're looking at trends in the numbers and doing interviews and talking with community, and that our role is to try to understand the whole as much as possible. And this is a part of that too. So our questions for you are just like, for those of you who participated, describe your experience. We're only going to spend just a few minutes on this, 5 minutes maybe. But also, what contribution do you think it's making or has made to your experience as a part of the work group? And I'm going to stop sharing so you all can see each other. And Austin has his hand up, so let's start there.
Good evening.
Hi.
For me, it was a really good experience. I can honestly say this was my second time going through the simulations. And I feel like it's a different experience every single time because each scenario is different. And I believe that some of the reasons, some of the things that some of our officers go through is so many different scenarios. It's like, how can you actually prepare for some of the scenarios and situations that may happen? So being as a member of this board, I feel like it just really opened up my eyes to what it is to be a real police officer in the line of duty. Sometimes we kind of just are on the back end, kind of just looking through the computer on different things that may happen in our nation through the different videos that we may see consistently. But also this opened up our eyes to see how tough the job is just as a whole. And I really feel like everybody on the committee should actually just try to make sure they actually go to the simulation that will be conducted later in March.
Well, thanks for that feedback.
Yeah, let's keep going. Who else? Ruben?
Ruben, did you have a comment?
No, I'm sorry.
All right.
So I'll chime in. I agree with Austin's perception and account of this experience. I found it to be very valuable and, as he said, eye-opening. I also want to appreciate the guidance and the instruction we received from the presenters in preparation for what we were going to encounter. It was very helpful and very thorough. And I, for one, am very pleased that our department has this level of ongoing training for our officers. I think you can tell also, oh, my dog said I'm done.
I can chime in if you want.
Yes.
I'm thankful mine doesn't know I'm doing this right now, so Barney's quiet. I appreciated the time to be out there. I agree. Each one of the scenarios, as we'd get through it, the follow-up we'd get from the officers that were either participating or observing, they really checked with our emotional response, how we were processing, what we were thinking and feeling, and making sure, they've had tons of training. We had brief exposure and opportunity to walk through it. Bringing their level of experience, you really kind of get a feel, small scale, of how many thoughts and how quickly they have to move through each decision, looking around what's happening around them, where their partner is, how they adjust for that. I got shot, I shot somebody. I mean, you kind of process a little different each time. It's impressive. They're not robotic, they're human, but they're so well trained to think so quick and react. It's really impressive. And so definitely gave me a good taste of how prepared they are, and still how unknown and unpredictable certain circumstances can be. They have no choice once they're standing there. So very worthwhile experience.
Thanks, Trish. We have time for a couple more. Who else, if anyone is interested?
Will?
Well, let's let Teresa weigh in, and then I'll allow our chairperson to, and Nico too. Teresa,
I agree. That was a very eye-opening experience for me. I learned a lot. It made me appreciate the Modesto Police Department even more than I already did, and gave me great respect for them, the training that they go through, because like Trish said, we had a few minutes to prepare, and I thought I was going to do pretty well, but it's hard. It's hard. So it made me respect them even more, and was kind of eye-opening to things that go on every day in our community.
Thanks, Teresa. Nico, let's hear from you, and then we'll go to Will.
All right. So yeah, same as everyone else. That was a wonderful experience. I really appreciated it, and thank you, MPD, for putting that on for us. For me, my main thoughts behind it was the amount of stress that these officers went through. The amount of stress that I went through going through these situations, and I did it for 2 hours. I know officer shifts are 8 to 12 hours probably. And not only going from situation to situation, but they're going from call to call. So for me to just put myself in their shoes and knowing that they've had a stressful situation just happen, and they're possibly having to go to yet another call that could be equally as stressful, and they have to stay calm and try not to bring what they just went through into a new call and react from an older situation. So the amount of training that they go through, the amount of stress that they go through, personally, it really brought up a lot of the mental health questions for me. So I really wanted to kind of highlight that on the mental health of these officers, and wanting to just make sure that they are very well taken care of within their own department. So that was a really good experience. Again, eye-opening, very challenging. And thank you guys for putting that on for us.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, also grateful for the all the staff that took time to put that on for us, particularly the live action, role playing that we did was really impactful. It was an intense experience, and more intense than I expected. You may have heard me laughing in the video, but I just, I don't want anyone to think it just rolled off me. I was jittery when I got home, from that experience. I think the point of us doing this is to maybe take things that maybe we understand or we kind of know in our head and really feel them in our bodies. And it was very clear to me the skills required, right, and the training that goes into handling these situations, and the emotional and mental toll. I mean, I'll just kind of along the lines of what Nico was saying, I didn't feel right the next day, and I'm very aware that was a simulation, right? That was just pretend. So really felt a lot from this, and even people who have maybe had some of the surprises spoiled for them, I think you'll feel it when you go through it. And just briefly in terms of what I'm taking back into our work, I mean, part of what we're going to talk about tonight is alternate response, and just the importance of when situations can be, all that comes with people entering these situations with police powers, and how necessary they are when they're truly necessary, and how we have an opportunity, I think, do good by not bringing those powers into a situation where they're not needed. That's at least a concept kind of on my mind, and in line with our work, and something that I'm thinking about in the context of this experience.
I appreciate that, Will. Solange, I see your hand up, so we'll go to you, but then we're going to transition to the next portion of our agenda with updates to come about other opportunities to participate and debrief about these things.
I want to echo just everything that everyone said. I was really impressed with the trainer, but as good as the training that was given, one of the things that stood out to me, I think all of the officers who were there training us just have amazing street smarts, and have insight and judgment that I think they came with that. I think it'd be very difficult to teach those things. And I just wanted to comment on that. And like Will, I was really affected by what happened. I was shot in the first scenario, and in the second one, I was so protective of myself. And in the third scenario, I was so afraid. I was afraid of getting close to that van. And I just really understand better what the psychological implications of doing this work is now. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, Chris, and all the staff who put that on, and everyone who shared just now. And again, encourage folks to participate if you haven't already when those other dates come up. And so now I think Edgar, I think we might update our roll call, because I think a few people have been able to join us since we did roll call. Is that the plan?
Well, yeah, just for the record, I'll be recording Leah Ashford here, correct?
Here.
Great. Jonathan Grammatico, I believe I saw you come in. Ruben Imperial.
Here.
Perfecto Munoz.
I'm here.
Excellent, thank you.
And you got Wendy?
Oh, excuse me, Wendy Bird, yes.
Welcome, Wendy. All right, so I believe now we are going to move into update from the Policies and Procedures Ad Hoc Group, and Dan is going to take us through a few slides, and then we'll have some discussion.
All right, can you hear me? All right. Well, I didn't want to raise my hand, but first of all, before I begin, I just want to say thank you to everyone for taking the time to go through that training and the use of force simulator and the scenarios. I think it's I'll echo what everyone else said, that I think it's very valuable. So I know you all took time out of your schedules to do that, so I appreciate it as a fellow committee member. I'm going to give a quick update on the policy and procedures ad hoc subcommittee that I'm a member of. So far we've had 4 meetings, and during those meetings we have discussed in depth the 2020 use of force audit, which was authored on April 4th of 2021. And this is an internal report that reviews all uses of force for the prior year. And one of the things that all uses of force for the Modesto Police Department, obviously, one of the things that stood out to some of the committee members was the fact that adult arrests per demographics seemed to be reflective of the city's population. However, when examining juvenile arrests, 21% of juveniles were white and 61% were Hispanic, and this is not representative of the demographics of the city. And so we had some in-depth discussion about some of the things that may be a factor for this, and we'll probably cover some of those things as we go here. And again, I guess I should stress that so I'm just gonna go over some of the things these are things that we have discussed. These are things that as a subcommittee we have discussed in depth, but just because they're on the screen, we haven't made any decisions on making a recommendation on any of them. Again, the kind of direction I received was to give a brief update as far as our progress. So these are things that we have spent some time discussing and taking time to better understand or to raise questions about. So I should have put that on there first. We also discussed personnel complaints and that process. We discussed administrative leave at the conclusion of a critical incident, a officer-involved shooting, a in-custody death, or something along those lines. How administrative leave works, when it is when officers are allowed to take it or put on administrative leave when they're not. So we discussed that. There was a question raised about enforcement, also known as traffic stops, and the protocols associated with that. And we spent some time discussing protocols. We reviewed some policy about that and had some in-depth discussion about that. Go to the next slide. Some of the things we also discussed, what a sergeant, which is a field supervisor, what their responsibility is at the conclusion of a use of force incident, and some of the things that they must do, that they're required to do per policy. We discussed blood draws at the conclusion of a shooting or after a shooting or a critical incident. We dove into policy 402, which is bias-based policing. And while discussing that, it was brought forward that this policy is reflective of state law, and that state law and department policy only requires bias-based policing training every 5 years. And there was some discussion about if there should be a future recommendation, or one of the recommendations should be if that should increase. And there was no, we didn't really discuss. We haven't finite what that interval would be yet, but there was some discussion about that, about increasing that training. We also discussed creating the need for greater clarity around dispositions of IAs or internal affairs investigations. Sometimes there are, as you may recall from the presentation done by the department, there are, I think, 5 or 6 different findings that the investigator can find, and some of them, unless you're well versed in them, they can be confusing. and some of them are confusing to everyone involved, whether they're a citizen who makes a complaint and then gets a letter saying what the finding is, or even some of our officers don't understand what the findings are. And so there was discussion about, is there a need to have better clarity for those dispositions? And then we discussed the police department's current staffing, and then the fact that the demographics of the department don't really reflect, or don't necessarily reflect, the city's demographics. And we spent some time discussing what may cause that, or what has caused that, and then also some things that we may be able to do to help improve that. Then you go to the next slide. So these were some of the key takeaways that we have developed as a subcommittee thus far. So these are not the final. These may not even be the recommendations, but as we sit today, these are kind of the direction and the questions and the statements, I guess, that the committee has had thus far. So the first one is that we think it would be beneficial to develop techniques to increase community involvement across all demographics, with an emphasis placed on minority populations. Obviously, increased community involvement, there's so many benefits to that, both from a police department perspective, but also from a community perspective. And so I don't think that anything bad could come from this, as long as it's rolled out properly with the proper intent behind it. I think that this would be a great initiative to come to try and accomplish. The next one is to collaborate with the community. To collaborate with community groups to focus on reducing youth crimes, especially what appears to be a disproportionate number of Hispanic youth arrests. And this kind of goes back to the use of, the arrest data that we discussed earlier. I think on the second slide, about I think 61% of the youth arrests were of Hispanic individuals, and so we kind of think that in discussing this, we think that there are multiple pieces of this that could help improve that. It's not just a police department issue; that it's more of a community issue. The police department definitely needs to be involved in this, but we need to collaborate together and to try and identify things that we can do as a community to help improve this. And then we came up with that to continue to support and examine best practices, and then to identify how to continue the conversation and increase the conversation past the Forward Together initiative with all the stakeholders. And so what's meant by that is, I'm fortunate enough to be a member of all of the committees, and I can tell you firsthand, as I'm sure Will can as well, that there's phenomenal conversations occurring within all of those committees. And I think that there's some fear amongst some that those communications could cease at the conclusion of the Forward Together process. And so one of the things that this committee, the Policies and Procedures Committee, discussed is that that they are interested in potentially making a recommendation to the full committee and ultimately to the council that it's important that something be identified to continue these conversations past the conclusion of Forward Together. So that's kind of what's meant by that. We go to the next slide. And then this will be the conclusion for mine, but what are our next steps? What are we going to do next? So as a committee, we're going to continue to work towards a recommendation to the full committee that we can ultimately agree upon and send to the council that all stakeholders can be satisfied with. I think that everyone who has truly been involved in this process, that is truly participating, I think that they understand that there's a give and takes on both sides. And so no matter what the vantage point is, maybe likely everyone won't get exactly what they want, but there's probably some areas that we can accomplish a agreement on where most stakeholders will be satisfied. And I think that's our ultimate goal at the end of this, is where most people are happy with the end product. So that's kind of the update for the policies and procedures. I welcome any questions, and I also welcome other committee members to make any statements that I may have forgotten. I was trying to keep it brief to respect everyone's time. So.
Thanks, Dan. We really appreciate that. And so that brings us to an opportunity for the rest of the work group to share. We'd really like for you to have your comments to be brief, but we want you to offer your feedback. What did you hear? Linda?
Okay, maybe it's what I didn't hear. And I could be wrong about this, but I haven't heard anything in the discussions about the seriously mentally ill. Is, what happens when you confront that, and how does that play into things? I haven't heard one single thing about that, and that disturbs me. That's it. That's the only thing I could say about it. And also, I really wanted to go to the simulation thing, but I got a new chef's knife and it decided to slice my finger instead of the vegetables. So I was in emergency and I couldn't go. But and I'm glad that you're going to have another session. But I would really like to have a scenario about what you deal with when you confront someone who is obviously either in sometimes you can't tell whether it's a mental illness or a drug induced hysteria or whatever. But it would be nice to be able to have some kind of scenario to reflect that, because that's the people that's who I brought to the table.
Right.
So that's the only thing I could say.
All right. Thank you, Linda. That feedback is really important. Perfecto Munoz?
Yes. This is what I heard. Community involvement. How are you going to address, especially as it relates to the Hispanic arrest rate of the juveniles? The other thing that I could suggest is parental involvement. What is their role in addressing this question? I think the other part of it would be the role of community-based organizations that are in the areas that maybe have a high prevalence of juvenile arrest. And I would be interested in knowing by zip code of those 60 of that arrest rate of Hispanics, exactly what zip codes they're in, because there may be church groups, community groups that could be included in the conversation on how to address some of the challenges that was presented as it relates to how do you address it. And so that's what I heard, and that's what I would suggest that we look at in terms of trying to really hone on to the challenge. Okay.
Right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for that feedback. Thomas?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. One, kind of to Linda's comment, and I'm part of all three subcommittees too, so it's sometimes get a little mixed up in my head. I know that we did spend a lot of time on mental health issues with the alternative response models, but I think we did talk about it, maybe just not to that great of a length of policies and procedures. And of course, what is the policy and procedure when dealing with mental health? But you're right. I think one of, the core issues that gets to, what we're all doing this for. So definitely can always be discussed in the different subcommittee groups. And then just real quick, it was obviously talked about the disparity in the juvenile arrests and in the officers, the makeup of the officers in the department. They were both, not just 5 to 10, but more like 20% kind of swing in the demographics. So, and I can't say that those are necessarily related, but they could be, and it definitely does speak to, maybe the need to especially reach out to the Latino community. And then there was one other one that I felt was kind of important too, that again may or may not be related, but could be, and that was even just the survey that was done with the community about asking what they would like to see in a police chief when the department was going through that process. Even that had a 15 to 20% swing in the ethnicity. So Latinos make up, this amount of the population. It was like 15% lower that even responded to that survey. And so, it was obviously going to be hard to say that those are related, but I felt that was an important kind of third thing that we did talk about all together, kind of in the same conversation about outreach to the Latino community and how, and Perfecto mentioned exactly, I think what we talked about was we need to kind of dig deeper into that. What are they being arrested for? Stuff like that, and we can really, get kind of down to the bottom of that. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. And I just want to remind those who in attendance that there will be plenty of time after all of the updates for us to have public comment. And so I think we have one more hand up, Solange. And Will after Solange.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Dan probably didn't have the benefit of minutes from the meeting that we had on February 15th, because I don't know if I've typed them and submitted them yet, but there were things brought up in that meeting that I just want to reference today. We talked about things that could be done to change certain policies to prevent civilian deaths. And there were 6 items that were raised, and the department responded to in part to them at the meeting, but was going to do further research and showing us what policies already exist, what procedures already exist to deal with those 6 items. And I'm just going to just state what they were really quickly. The first item was regarding making tasers a credible substitute for lethal force. The second was to have rules that prohibit shootings by lone officers, requiring officers to request assistance before using lethal force. The third was prohibiting the use of deadly force in response to knives and non-blade weapons, with very few exceptions. The fourth had to do with carefully reviewing the outcome of car chases. The fifth had to do with gunfire in pursuit of a fleeing suspect, that should be prohibited unless there's a credible and specific threat that the suspect will kill if not apprehended. The sixth had to do with stop shooting protocols to prevent police officers from continued shooting when alone or in groups, when the immediate threat to an officer or the innocent civilian has been resolved. As I indicated, there was a verbal response to a lot of those items, but the department was going to work to identify policies and procedures that already exist that may already address those items. And we want to look carefully at those, and we'll be talking about that later after we get those responses and review them.
All right, thank you, Solange.
Yes. Thank you, Dan, for that really thorough presentation, and Solange for bringing that up to the fully up to date with information from our last meeting. And yeah, my understanding is the department's going to give us written responses to those areas, and that'll be really important to review. I was struck by the sheer number of topics we covered in those couple of meetings, and Linda pointing out that there's still very important things that haven't been touched on that we need to add to the agenda for the next meeting. And I'll just kind of reiterate the final point about continuing the conversation. I think just speaking for myself, what I'm finding, and I think others are finding, is that we're not finding a lot of quick fixes, just change this language and this policy and everything will be fine. Things like this issue, this disparity in juvenile arrests is something that requires really deep engagement and careful thought, and isn't something we're going to resolve or even make a dent in the time that this committee exists. So just for me, it really underscores the importance of that final point about this conversation being ongoing and continuing beyond the next couple months.
That's great. And so I just really want to remind everyone that no decisions are being made tonight, and they haven't been made. And so what we've seen is just a continual collection of data so that we can continue to gather information that'll help formulate the recommendations that eventually the policies and procedure ad hoc group will bring to the full work group for recommendations. So your feedback is just continual data and information as they continue to go back and continue to work and to explore these areas. And so we're going to turn it over to Leah, who is responsible for our alternative response models.
Hello. And I'm happy to have Ruben chime in when needed. Will could certainly chime in. Our group has had like 3 different meetings so far, and I thought I would just kind of share what has been reviewed with us, some of the questions we've asked, and then some of what recommendations we're considering at the moment. Although, as has already been said, we're just starting to figure this out. So I don't think we're anywhere near, true final recommendations, but we'll share some of what we've been considering. So Chief Gillespie certainly started it off by going a little bit more in depth with us with what he shared with the full group about alternative response models and the research that the police department has already done. Different other cities they've reached out to see what other cities are doing, like the Cahoots program, et cetera, in Portland and a few other that is out there. I know I was encouraged to hear from Dan to say that our Police Officers Association, the union, is certainly fully in support of these alternative response models. They don't see it as, some kind of a threat or something, but are happy to have the additional support and to potentially have clinicians and other health officers out there with them helping to solve some issues. So currently what we have in our police force, and they kind of went over this, is we have a HEART team, the Homeless Engagement and Response team that I think has already been sort of an alternative response group in the past, I think for the past 3 or 4 years, potentially. We have a county assessment response team, the CARE team, that also has, I think it's a mental health clinician, a nurse, a social worker, and it seems like there was someone else as well that goes out to work with those who are, and Ruben would have better words here, but are more consistently being seen in the system and need more long-term help and services, and they're looking to provide that for those in our community. And then recently, within the last 12 to 18 months, the police force has been creating a chat team that is also started to respond to non-criminal 911 calls with a clinician, I think, and a health officer in some cases to go and respond to calls. And so learning more about what have they learned through that, what's working, what's not working, what are they considering doing differently. So we've been asking those different things. And then the chief also shared with us how they went back and got data from the past, I forget, 10 to 15 years and all the different calls that might in some way either refer to mental health or to non-safety issues that other teams could handle, and then some of the data that he had around that. So I will share a couple slides with some data here, Kate. And if I don't say this correct, Chief Gillespie, you're welcome to jump in as well. So I think from what they looked at, they were seeing how many keywords indicated that this was a call where there was a safety issue and you would need to have a police officer there. And so they've got that percent more around 36%, where there was 64% where potentially you could have an alternative response model respond to a call and handle that. So they did see that this is possible and is something that could happen in the community, which is why they were already starting to work on that. Then the next slide, yep, this one. So since they have started using chat teams, the type of calls they have responded to so far, you'll see the highest one has been like public nuisance calls, maybe verbal fights, trespassing, maybe security checks, those kinds of things. And the amount of time each call has seemed to take to give them an understanding of if they create these response models, then based on the amount of time, one team would be able to likely respond to 13 calls in a day. And so looking at that, they are considering potentially having 4 alternative response groups that 2 could trade off within a certain amount of time to cover 24 hours, and then another 2, like 4 on, 3 off, something like that. And so they're looking at potentially 4 groups that they would create. If you could go to the next one. So what our team has been asking in relation to this is kind of considering whether that alternative response program should be fall under the police department or be a separate nonprofit, because the research that they did with different cities indicated sometimes it's one, sometimes it's another. And usually when it's a separate nonprofit, it is almost like, I think, the county team where there's a social worker and a mental health clinician, et cetera, like a team going out, and they were run by a separate nonprofit. Or the fact that one of our alternative response models is responding to 911 calls, if that means they should fall under certainly the police department if they're responding to 911 calls. So we're still kind of looking at that and considering what makes the most sense, and maybe it might be different groups, fall in different areas, but that's something we've been asking and discussing. We're also asking whether or not mental health agencies might be able to share basic information maybe with the police on maybe like whether somebody has a mental health recurring issue, not saying what it is or that type of a thing, but knowing so the police could know when they go out to what to expect. We have heard that some cities or counties are able to share that information. So we're trying to figure out how that would work and not, go over HIPAA rules or laws, but also give the police officers responding more information when they're headed to a call. So to Linda's point, they maybe know whether this is a person who's dealing with a drug issue or it's a mental health issue, if they might have prior knowledge of something. We've also been inquiring around what training officers receive so that they can better recognize somebody who's dealing with a mental health issue versus a drug issue or some other type of issue. So how well can they recognize a mental health issue? We're also looking at if these alternative response programs were rolled out, how could they be funded long-term? Because right now there are grant funds available, but we all know grants come and go. And if this really works and helps, we would like to see a way that this could be funded long-term. And then we've also been asking about whether or not there should be a community panel that would review on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, maybe calls that dealt with mental health issues and how it was handled, and was it handled well, and what could be better ways to handle in the future. So if there might be a panel that could review that. And I think I've heard some of the other groups have been talking about panels and reviewing police calls. So maybe it's something we might be able to coordinate on. Next slide. So currently the recommendations we are considering, we've got 2 slides here. The first one talks about us, whether it's kind of for us to decide what might be the best model and which one we would want to recommend, whether we'd like to continue with the chat where it is a mental health clinician that's going out with a health worker or officer responding to some of those 911 calls, whether we think some areas have a mental health clinician paired up with a police officer and they go out together, which is called MCERT. Or whether it is simply 2 mental health clinicians that are sent to a call. That's another model. And then yesterday, in our meeting yesterday, somebody mentioned, is it possible to simply have a mental health clinician available by Zoom if the police feel like they have encountered a situation where they need the help of a mental health clinician? They could be called in that way versus going on a regular basis with the police. So we're looking at several different models and considering what we think might be best to recommend. And then the next one is wanting to recommend the creation of some type of collaborative group that could work through what might be possible for mental health agencies to share with the police, if there's some way to do that. And so maybe get some folks from the mental health agencies together with the police to discuss what's possible. The next recommendation is looking at funding. If there's some recommendation we could make or confirm as according to how other cities do it, et cetera, that we might recommend about how to get that long-term funding. Also looking at recommending an increase in training for officers on how to better recognize mental health issues, but also certainly for those clinicians, although we know they do get training, but making sure we feel like they're safe if they were to go out with police officers. And then the last one was, I know when Chief Gillespie was going through the data initially about safety related calls and non-safety related calls, he was wondering whether it was being tracked as well as it could be so that we would know really accurately when a clinician could go and when they probably shouldn't go. And so looking, is there something we could recommend on that so it's tracked better? So that's what we've done so far. And looking forward to certainly digging into this a little more in the future.
Thank you, Leah. Sounds like you guys really did a lot of work and a lot of interacting. And so now for the rest of the work group, what did you hear? What did you like? What questions do you have? What recommendations do you have to add to this for this particular work group? And we'll start with Perfecto Munoz.
Yes, in terms of what I heard the issue of alternatives, response, team. And I think that those are critical points to think about in terms of how do you respond, and how the team and what the makeup of the team is. And one of the things that I will, I remember years and years ago when I was just a young man, they used to have what they call a team group that helped respond to some of the juvenile situations. And when they were not teenagers, but they were young adults in their 20s and older, to help with the officers address that may be in a difficult situation. And so that may be a point of interest. And secondly, the journey to try to address these problems doesn't really respond well when you don't have other people at the table. In other words, organizations that might be able to assist agencies to better respond to the needs of these challenges within the designated community as it relates to what has been discussed. So I'll stop there.
Right. Thank you, Perfecto. We really appreciate that feedback. And Linda?
Well, I just wanted to also comment that I'm on the panel, but oftentimes the difference between someone in a mental health crisis and a substance abuse crisis is not, you're not able to ascertain in the field because they can be very, very similar. So I would say, for me, I would include both the, and when considering an alternate response, you may not know if it's, one or the other or a combination of both. Right. And so I would say that it should be the same, considered in the same way.
That's excellent feedback. And so that type of feedback is really what we're looking for this particular group, so that they can take that information back to the next meeting that they have. Brad Hahn, your thoughts?
Yes, I just want to comment on both groups. It really seems like both of them have really looked at the breadth of what they're talking about. And the other thing that is very impressive to me is that they're talking about what the solution of it might involve, something like we're doing now to continue this process of dialogue. And I think that it kind of goes beyond what we were kind of just asked to give recommendations to the city council, but it's going beyond that because that's the way it's going to work, is if we continue to have dialogue. And I'm very impressed with how we're all different and we're all kind of coming into the same arena and working out through the different issues. It's very encouraging to me. And we're not going to get much of a report. I'm on the other one, the slow one. They put me on that one. So but it's kind of the same thing there. I really feel like we're making fantastic progress to a common place.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. I want to call on Ruben, and then we'll close out with Will, unless someone else has some feedback.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ruben. I'm on the committee as well. I'm the director of the Behavioral Health and Recovery Services, the county's mental health and substance use disorder treatment provider. And I want to say, one, just been really encouraged with the dialogue and thinking about how to create alternative response models for folks in distress, whether it's mental illness or other conditions in our lives that create that level of distress. But I think I just want to make so we did talk about this in our work group, and I think it's in a distinction to bring up because it's come up a few times in the groups, that when we've talked about alternative response models, some of the interventions like chat, for instance, have the priority population of those that are experiencing homelessness. And often when we talk about alternative response models, the conversations do lead in an area where there's a broader brush that is used to describe populations, whether they're homeless or substance use or other behaviors that people start to connect with an alternative response. I think all of those are legitimate conversations and populations for us to consider. However, I think as a department, as a behavioral health, mental health department, we, I think, continue to look forward to these conversations in ways where it's really about those mental health emergencies in our community. Not that these other broader populations really, we have a focus. I think there needs to be continued effort. We're really encouraged, though, by the dialogue and the commitment, those involved in this process to think about that intersection between where individuals are experiencing a mental health crisis, or their family member is experiencing a mental health crisis, and their option is to call 911. I think just an important distinction that as we get through these conversations, whether it's policy, whether it's practice, whether it's alternative response, whatever work group we're working on, I think it's one of those finer points we need to start to pull out of all of our conversations. And the serving homeless populations and those that have other distress in communities or are causing distress in community is a very separate and a very distinct intervention compared to trying to intervene in a mental health emergency. And there are two different tools that are applied and strategies that are applied, skill sets, and even staff. And so I think in today's conversations, we've heard that. And I think just want to amplify that message, that I think it's good as we start to have these conversations, we start to differentiate a bit. And I think that would help clarify and strengthen both those interests in terms of those that do want and have an interest in those broader populations. Because there's definitely work in the area that we need to continue to do that work. And it'll strengthen that work, but it will also strengthen the work of intervening in a mental health emergency, because strategies to address those issues are very different. So, and just want to, again, show my appreciation for all the conversations we're having and all the partnerships that are forming here. And we look forward to continuing to develop this conversation with you all. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you for your wisdom and your expertise in this area. Will, and then we'll go to Teresa.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just want to thank Leah for that great presentation, and I agree with Brad. These were two awesome presentations with a lot of depth and substance to them. And yeah, just what Ruben was just sharing brought up for me. I think we all went through a period of learning and what are all these acronyms? Why are there so many teams? What's going on? But then understanding the vital role that each of them play and how these pieces of the puzzle, fit together. So I think when we talk about different models and different approaches, more and more for me, it's all of the above. We need all of these pieces because they all play a really important role. And also another, really just key part of the experience is the thought and just concrete planning that's gone into the conversations around expanding existing programs, particularly Chad. And want to thank Chief Gillespie for, you saw some of the data he's put together in the presentation in November, and I think a few more slides that Leah just shared. And there was even some more stuff we saw at our last meeting around a staffing plan and a concept budget, and really crunching the numbers of what would it take to scale up to meet the need that's been identified. There are vacant positions being filled. We got an update on hiring, and my understanding and impression is that it's going exceptionally well, and there's a lot of qualified applicants interested in doing this work, certainly relative to the number of positions. And so I think that's really exciting and concrete. And what we are talking about essentially is building in Modesto a program similar to and roughly the same scale as the Cahoots program, not necessarily to copy Cahoots, but because that data-driven assessment came up with a workload that just happens to be kind of similar. But so I think that's exciting. And the other theme that came through is community engagement, ongoing community engagement, right? To make sure that there's trust in this service and that there's feedback, and that that it's doing its best to serve where it's most needed. So just want to thank everyone involved in explaining these things to us and providing data and information, and really excited about the direction this one's going.
Thanks, Will. And I just want to remind us all that, again, no decisions are being made this evening. These are just opportunities for us to continue to collect data, and so that data can be used in the formulation of the recommendations that this ad hoc committee will eventually present to the full work group. And so we have a few other brief comments, and let's go with Teresa, and then Solange, and then I think Linda had another comment.
Hi, everybody. I was listening intently to what Leah and then especially Ruben said. And I know we've created Heart and Chat and Care. And I know from feedback in the community that those programs really help. But a question in my mind is, do we have agencies that families can call when their family member is in a mental health crisis, so that those aren't police calls? Because I know Heart, Chat, and Care aren't always available.
Okay, All right, we'll take that question and track that. And we appreciate you for asking that question. Solange, your thought? Okay, thank you. Linda?
I just wanted to make a last comment. I agree about Chief Gillespie he's just been great about working with everyone, and he seems very cooperative and interested in making things better for all of us. And but I did want to say that the ultimate thing for me is that we come up with a system that lessens the amount of lethal outcomes. Lethal outcomes don't always mean the person with a mental illness crisis, but it also can mean for a community member or a police officer. So my ultimate goal is to lessen what happens there.
Thank you, Linda. We appreciate that. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Will.
Yeah, absolutely. Next, we're going to hear very briefly from the accountability group, what Brad jokingly referred to as the slow group. Of course, it's not the slow group, it's just the group that started last, but we've met on a compressed schedule to try and catch up. So I think Tom is going to give literally a 1-minute update on that, and then we're going to take a stretch break, and then we're going to go to public comment. And I've seen hands go up in the attendees section, so I appreciate everyone's patience. So we'll get to public comment in just a few minutes. Tom, go ahead if you just want to say a few words. I think we can, I don't think we need slides for this, right? I think there's no, yeah.
No, like Will already said, this was the last part, just a review maybe for the public too. This were the last meetings that we had, the accountability parts, and it's such a big issue. We had 2 meetings, so we kind of had to even wait another month. So we've had 3 meetings. We might be like 1 meeting behind the other groups, so we still have a lot of work to do, and that's why this will be really short. Very complex subject matter, obviously. Lots of models out there in different cities to look at, that we are looking at. We've kind of focused on the city of Anaheim, especially. We heard the presentation from Rick Armendariz, who used to work for Modesto Police. So very interested in his expertise and his experience, and also, working in Modesto. And so we are looking at that model more closely, but still have a lot to do. And once we have enough to put in a PowerPoint to report back, we will definitely do that. And unless there's questions, that's really where we're at that stage.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. And we've seen some of the results of the policies and procedures, having the opportunity to meet and to go over things together. And we've seen and heard the results of the alternative response ad hoc committee and what they've been able to do together. And eventually we'll have that same level of feedback that comes from the accountability work group. But for right now, I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions or comments or thoughts that you want to share with this particular ad hoc group, you can send those to Tom, to Will, to myself, or to Kate, and we'll make sure that those are expressed to the work group. Because we haven't had an opportunity to do very much in that particular ad hoc committee, it's important for us to just allow them to continue to do their work. But we need that feedback from you. If you have anything that you just must share, then please send it to one of us, and we'll make sure that ad hoc group gets access to that information. All right, Will?
Yes, thank you, Michael. So yeah, we'll have a similarly detailed presentation from the accountability ad hoc group next month, but I think maybe this was the right amount of information for tonight to get everyone's feedback on, and for those ad hoc groups to take back and, like I said, start working on recommendations. So I think let's take a 5-minute break just so everyone can stretch. We'll come back at let's say 6 minutes. We'll come back right at 7 on the dot. And then we'll take public comment. I think we're doing well on time. So if public comment brings anything up, if there are a few other, any additional discussion, we can talk briefly. And then we'll talk about next steps kind of where we go from here, and then we'll adjourn. So I'll see everyone back at 7 o'clock on the dot. All right. 7 o'clock. Let's come on back. And members of the public who wish to speak can go ahead and start raising their hands while we all kind of come back on video. If we have any public comment, and I see at least one hand. All right, so so public comment will be 3 minutes, and we really value feedback on any of the concept or draft recommendations that have just been presented. And just a reminder, as usual, for anyone who can't make a comment or who's watching on YouTube or watching this the next day on YouTube, there is a email address and phone number and lots of ways to get in touch with us on the Forward Together website to give additional feedback. And just Google Modesto Forward Together, and you'll find it. All right, so with that, I'll turn it over to, it looks like we have Steve and then Darlene for public comment so far. So you'll be invited to become, yep, here you are. Go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, you guys can hear me?
Yep.
Hi, good evening. I just want to reiterate my concern about this process and to remind everyone that this is not just happening in a vacuum out of the middle of nowhere. We have a very, very sad, long-standing history of many, many, many examples of police being violent for no reason in situations that don't help public safety whatsoever. I do want to say, I've been trying to kind of get caught up on all these meetings, watching on YouTube. I appreciate you guys making that accessible. It's a shame you can't make everything accessible. I think it's a poor excuse to say that it's too much work, but I do appreciate at least the extent to which you've done that. I will say though, if I was not a fluent English speaker and reader, I'd be lost. You guys need to put all of this information in Spanish on your website. You know, I don't need to reiterate all that. You guys just need to get on top of it. There's no way that I could be effective at all in trying to learn about all the things going on and everything that is incorporated into this process if I wasn't fluent in English. I do have an excerpt that I would like to share with you guys. And this is from an anonymous letter from a police officer, a Modesto police officer from 2010 to, I believe, the Modesto beat, yeah. And it states, police brutality is still going on, and the solid, hardworking police officers have reported this ongoing activity to Captain Ballantyne and Chief Harden, who have done nothing about it. Officers have also confronted Lieutenant Cloward. Cloward has directed sergeants to leave these guys alone. Lieutenant Cloward, Captain Ballantyne, and Chief Harden are all canine buddies and still protect each other. The officers committing these acts, he's talking about, what is it, like beat and release? These officers committing these acts are James Murphy, Orrin Nelson, Florencio Costellas, and Joe LaMantia. It goes on to say some other stuff. This is a police officer. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a new thing. We have a problem. We cannot let the police and other public officials commandeer the entire process. The measure of whether this is a true process and whether any recommendations or outcomes are authentic and legitimate is the extent to which it is the will of the people. Again, Jeff Dirksey, Officer Starr, Officer Tate, Chief Gillespie, and the other cops doing presentations. I say nothing but police running this whole show. You guys had panelists come and talk about, ironically, police accountability. Three of those four. Yeah, I'm talking here, buddy. Don't interrupt
3
me.
minutes,
I only get
Steve.
3 minutes.
Yep.
I only get 3 minutes.
Yep. So Steve, 3 minutes, we're up. And next we have Darlene and Ramon.
Hello.
Hello, Darlene.
First of all, I just want to thank you all for working so hard and trying to make some changes in our community, and praying that all of us can work together to make this happen. I wanted to talk about, I'm happy to hear about the blood draws after shootings and critical incidents. I agree with Linda Mayo about mental health training, and that's why we need something like a CAHOOTS program. I was wondering how many scenarios that were given to you were about de-escalation, and are these simulations available to the public or just to you guys? There are no national standards for training for police officers in the United States. The US requires only 500 hours of training with a high school diploma. Finland requires 5,500 hours with a college degree. Germany requires 4,000 hours of training with a college degree. What type of training does the police get from Modesto Police Department? The US Police Academy spends far more time on firearm training than one on de-escalation training. Police officers are 5 times more likely to kill themselves than to be killed by homicide. We need greater emphasis on police officers' mental health training. Currently, they only get a few hours of training, if any, on self-care. Mentally unstable officers are not only scary for himself, but also for our entire community. England, Ireland, and Norway police officers do not carry firearms at all on regular patrol. Policing in the US is not strictly regulated. For example, you would not have a field training. For example, Derek Chauvin, the officer who killed George Floyd in Minneapolis, had dozens of misconduct complaints, and he was training other officers. You would not have a field training officer with a very bad disciplinary record in the English police system. That's inconceivable. Joseph Lamatia in 2010 was charged with beat and release. He was still allowed to be an officer and to kill my son. We have to change the root of the problem and discipline officers so they don't get to continue to kill innocent people. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. There was a question about these scenarios. I believe there was some discussion about in the future making this training available to the public. So there may be more information about that. And I wouldn't know how to characterize how many were about de-escalation, but I would say maybe some of them were at least. Thank you. Next we have Ramon.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the chance to speak. I enjoyed the presentation through the whole hours, and what called me like shocking but not surprised is the juvenile arrest rates in Modesto. 21% of juvenile arrests were white, 61% were Hispanic. So that is a disproportionate number of how police patrol the marginalized communities. And from what I've learned from the Alonso Nunez case, this brings a lot of fear of marginalized and immigrant community. And that's brought for a lot of questions. How could we reduce so much disproportionate arrest as well as building trust in these communities? Simple, invest in them. We cannot allow them because people of color are more likely to be stopped by police for no reason other than they look suspicious or the color of skin or and also for training, the simulation training that I've seen, there's like 2 examples that every officer should watch. The shooting of Trevor Seaver and the beating of Alonso Nunez, because these 2 cases, it represents failure on these officers. for not following a proper training procedure, as well as violating California and federal law under color of authority. One of them is tragic and the other resulted in devastation on themselves as well as their family. However, the officers involved, one is facing charges and the other 4 involved they never got held accountable. But this brings me to my mind, the Alonso case, when these officers are being held accountable, they're never held accountable, and they'll end up being like Joseph Lamatia or continue with his forces. And I bet that these officers are making jokes on Alonso because he's browner than them. And ironically, the officer that responded to that call is Mexican himself, but he spoke English. And Alonso never resisted. He had language issues because he's not fluent in English. And the officer with a Mexican last name spoke English instead of Spanish. What does it bring to the community, to our marginalized communities? This is outrageous, and this is what's emblem of why the marginalized communities have less trust in the police in general, and this is why the George Floyd uprising happened almost 2 years ago, and before I go on, does Modesto police still have no-knock warrants in the wake of Amir Locke? And how you guys gonna start looking at that policy and make changes so that we prevent deaths from no-knock warrants? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon. I think we had a question about no-knock warrants in a previous meeting. I think we got some information from the department. I think it was that there wasn't any recollection of a recent no-knock warrant, but that's maybe something in policies and procedures we could follow up on. So thank you for public comment. Not seeing any additional public comment at this time. So we'll close public comment. All right, so I think now I'll just say a few words about kind of next steps, and remember our goal right now is to align on next steps. So I'd love to, we have a good amount of time. I think we could have a good discussion about this and still get out of here a little bit before our scheduled 8 o'clock. So Kate has an announcement as well, so we'll make sure to get that in too. As we mentioned several times, the accountability ad hoc group is going to come back with a presentation in March. As Tom told us, that group has taken particular interest in Anaheim, and we're going to have some further conversations and collect some other data and information and resources, and so have a presentation in March. And I think taking the feedback that the other 2 ad hoc groups got from the rest of us tonight, it's a good time to start writing. I think those presentations were a good framework of what's been done so far and where we're headed. And I think the work is to incorporate that feedback and continue developing those ideas and start working towards recommendations. We've also, been having a number of conversations with other work group members and staff about community feedback and getting more input from the community. And I think one thing that's been suggested that's very wise is that when we start to have written recommendations, right, draft recommendations that people can read and flip through and react to, that's going to be a really productive time for getting additional feedback from the community. So I want to kind of offer, I don't know if it's a challenge or a goal or whatever, but I think I'll just say, I think it's achievable for us to have a draft recommendation, a set of draft recommendations for our April meeting. So roughly 2 months from tonight. Now I'll immediately say, it's better to be late than wrong. I wouldn't want us to hurry through our work or skip important steps or let some artificial deadline, push us in the wrong direction. But based on my feelings and what I've seen and conversations I've had, I feel like this is achievable. So I just want to put that out there as a goal to see if we could get drafts. Now, again, not final, but draft recommendations really written down in black and white, summarizing what we've done and what we've considered and what we would recommend to the council for our April meeting. And I think if we could do that, that would put us in a really good position to, first of all, really clarify our own thinking really check that we're building consensus as we think we are, get everyone's feedback, but then also, like I was just saying, really get community input on this. So I'd love to hear people's reactions to that. And then we've also been talking a lot about listening sessions. And as hopefully everyone remembers, although it feels like a long time ago, this process started with a listening session. It was a public meeting where dozens of people, maybe over 100 people, came and commented. And it was just a time for city leaders to listen and take in feedback. So I think we will almost definitely, everything's collaborative and we'll decide what we want to do. But I imagine we'll almost definitely want to do something like that again, where there's a public meeting, where the public has our draft recommendations and has time to read them and can come and make comments, written comments or public comments or whatever is needed. But another thing we've been talking about is what do we need to do above and beyond just having a town hall meeting or a public meeting, right? We all come here with some sort of constituency, and hopefully everyone is communicating information back to the people they're in community with and getting input as we go. But I'd really encourage everyone to think seriously now about what spaces do we need to go to, what conversations do we need to have to be proactive about getting feedback. We don't want to finish our process and say, oh, if only we had done more work to engage the community. So Perfecto was talking earlier about, not to single you out Perfecto, but about particular zip codes and particular communities and community-based organizations that have reach in areas where we really need to be thinking about, I think for programs, but also right now as we're forming these recommendations. That's the kind of thinking that in the next couple months, in April and May, it'd be great to, and we can be really flexible, going to where the community is, having whatever language interpretation services are needed, and hearing from who we need to hear from. So that was what I wanted to say about next steps. I'd love to just open up and hear feedback from anyone else in the group about alignment with that kind of vision of where we go over the next couple months, corrections, additions, other ideas. And I see Brad's hand is up. Oh, and that, yeah, or it was up.
Remember, I'm from the slow group, so I don't. No, I very much agree with you on where we are. I'm not sure that I think it's kind of an interesting situation we're in, because we're recommending something. We're not the final say so. I think we need to do as much public input as we can possibly get. But I think we need to, as far as the recommendations become clear and the city council acts on them, if they want to engage us to help them go share that with the community, I think that's very appropriate. But I don't think that it could be misconstrued as we're pushing our answers on the city council, when we need to respect their position to be able to accept what we receive and not accept some stuff too. So, but I do believe that there really is a role for us to go to our constituencies and I think with the blessing of the council, and say, here's what we are, where we are. We could go, this council member could come with us. But I think it's really good for them, the community, to see that it's us that gave the recommendations, not the politicians, that it's us community members that are trying to get a better Modesto. And something I said in one of our last meetings is that, something I never thought of, that we want the Modesto Police Department to be the best police department in the whole nation. And that's what we're driving for in this whole thing, is that it does function, and we don't see some of the problems other places have, because we're building this coalition of community and policing environment where we can communicate together. So that's kind of, I think we're really in a good spot. I really do. I think we're very close to being able to make recommendations.
Yes, thank you, Brad. And that's a really good reminder that our work is, when we're formally done, our work is there's still additional community outreach that the council will do, and we will perhaps be called upon to explain some of our thinking to the council and be ambassadors to the community. So I absolutely agree. Yeah, Linda.
I'd just like to respond on one thing, is that it isn't that we don't want to see our police department have problems like other police departments do, because our police department has had problems. And that's why the community has been crying for this kind of a coalition to come up with solutions. And I really want my constituents to know that I realize that, and that I am definitely working for that goal. And this isn't I'm not being against our police department. I think they've been very cooperative, and we're working together. So I do feel a good sense about that. But we have had problems here. So, and we need to take care of those problems to make our community safer and our community happier about it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Other comments in the work group? Oh, Leah, go ahead.
I think I just wanted to say to the public comment, the person who was concerned about training, that was my concern coming in here. And I know certainly after the incident happened with George Floyd, I went out seeing what I could find online about what our police do about training. So getting to be a part of these simulations recently and hearing them say how they have changed from what policing used to be, which was just like one day of firearms training once a year sort of a thing, that now they are doing these real-time, real situation simulations on a monthly basis with police officers, and debriefing after each one, what worked, what didn't, what should you, all of that, and seeing all that our police officers are being trained in. And in my mind, what we were doing, almost the bulk of it was de-escalation. I think the only ones that weren't were the ones where they got shot outright without the ability to de-escalate. So anyway, I just wanted to confirm that I have been encouraged by seeing the focus on new ways of doing training from maybe what it had been previous, and that it is making me feel better about our police force, to Brad's point of getting toward being a national better example sort of a thing. My hope is they're doing similar things in Atlanta, where I've got a nephew that I'm concerned about. So anyway, just it's good to see the training being done. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. And I hope it's okay. I'm just going to keep reacting to things. That brings up for me that when we have our draft recommendations, that's a good time too to kind of summarize what we've learned and address some, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, some community questions like around training. We can share what we've learned. And Solange brought up earlier some recommendations or concepts that she had brought into policies and procedures, and we can have responses to those. So yeah, those all be good things to include. Kalua. Kalua, you're muted.
I can raise my hand, but apparently I don't know how to unmute. One of the things I wanted to have you all at least consider, there's a comment made about waiting until that you present to the council and then the outreach happens. I think it's more effective. You all are 24, 25, 26 people versus 6 council members with no staff. You were selected because of the constituency and organizations that you come from. So I think there's a real value in you all taking the temperature of your constituencies before, as part of what you present to the council. Not that there won't be some follow-up, but I think there's a lot of value in you all owning and being very proud of the work that you're doing and the recommendations that come forward. I've taken some notes, particularly about the violence prevention and youth. And so if someone will reach out to me in the next couple of days, I'll tell you about a couple of resources that I think would be helpful as some things that you could investigate as possible solutions based on some national organizations on violence prevention with young people. I was in Santa Rosa. There was a violence prevention partnership that was established. There's a group out of Stockton. So there's a lot of work already being done around how do you manage youth violence, and by extension, the kind of intersection of youth and law enforcement. So I definitely hope that I can share that information. But the biggest thing I wanted you to say is do the work of vetting and taking the temperature about receptiveness about the ideas as part of what you take to the council, as opposed to waiting till that coming later. That's all.
Thank you, Kalua. Yeah. And maybe we could work some of that information on violence prevention into the March meeting if we have space in the agenda. That sounds interesting and important. All right, other comments? Yes, Tom.
Hey, I'll try to be brief. I had just some general comments. I think it's important, as was mentioned, to acknowledge, public comment, and folks took time out of their day to listen to the meeting and to comment. We might just want to think about in the future. I know, 3-minute limit is a 3-minute limit. It's the same for everybody. We have to have a limit. Maybe we look at the totality of the circumstances and how many people are going to speak and say, your 3 minutes are up, try to wrap it up, and just be a little more welcoming to the public comment, even if, folks go over their time, which, so that comment, I did want to say something about the public comment itself about cops running the show. I like to think that people that have known me and the work I've done, I would say, if I thought that was the case, that if this wasn't a inclusive dialogue and process that we're involved in, I'll just keep it at that, if I felt that was the case, I would say something. And the beat and release letter from back in 2010, I thought that was interesting. And it actually, for me, I remember that back then, it was a good example of, even though it was an anonymous letter, and I understand what that, comes with, it was investigated, but only by the department itself. And that, I know just from comments that I heard from the community left, it's an example of a situation where people did not feel fulfilled that was a good faith effort to really look into the issues that were involved in that letter. And I appreciate Darlene speaking as well, and that did make me think of why folks might see the process as one-sided. We haven't really had an opportunity to hear from more community stories, and I think that's something that we should make the effort to do. I know that for a lot, because I've worked with people who have made complaints against the department. It's not always the top of their priority list to come in and air that out in front of a lot of people, especially police officers present. But it's important to try to get to some everyday community member stories that they might have, and we can look at those specific instances, and maybe there's something that we can learn from that in what we're doing and the recommendations we're going to make. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I absolutely want to create spaces where people can share. And I agree, we can be a little flexible on the time limits. And I always try to let people know their 3 minutes is up and give them a few seconds to finish up, though earlier it went off the rails a little bit. So that was cut short. Other comments? Yeah, Nico.
Yeah, so with the community outreach, I was kind of wondering if there was a way that we can possibly come up with like a survey that we can try to push out to the community. We all can come up with some questions to ask the community and see how many responses we can get to help it be a little bit easier to get some community involvement. Today, I think, was one of the best outcomes of community involvement. We've had the most comments we've had so far. And so if we just keep trying to get some more community members to come in and make public comments or just release a survey. So I'm not sure how we can go about that, but that would be something I'd be interested in looking into. And then there was one other thing. I wanted to kind of bring up a topic. I don't know if we should bring it up online or offline, but it's regarding members of our own Forward Together committee. Some that aren't able to make it. I feel like it is very important for people to be here. They committed to something, and it's very upsetting to see people not make those commitments that they made, because there's possibly room for other people that are willing to make this commitment and stick to it. And so I just wanted to bring that up. It was something that has bothered me from about the second meeting that we've had. It's kind of a continuous issue. So yeah, those are my two things I just wanted to bring up.
Yeah, thank you, Nico. Solange.
Kalula spoke about our going out to community groups once we have our recommendations and getting input. I think it's important when we do that, that we tap into existing groups and existing events so that, you already have an audience that's congregated there for a purpose. And I think we'll be able to reach people. And I just wanted to make the point that, my background is I was an immigration attorney for a number of years and was very accustomed to going out into the community and doing presentations on immigration matters. I'm fluent in Spanish, and when we do those presentations, to the Latino community, I know I'd be willing to do a lot of that, do my presentation in Spanish, and we could have translators there as well. But I think it's important to reach that community. I agree that it would have been useful to have our materials interpreted into Spanish. Maybe when we come up with the final or the recommendations that we're going to present to the group, we'll have those items translated at that time. But anyway, and then I wanted to say one thing to Mrs. Ruiz. I think about your son every time I attend a meeting. I'm a mom. I have a 30-year-old and a 33-year-old, and I have a godson who's bipolar. I think about you every time. And the questions I raise in these meetings, I think about your perspective, and I just want you to know that.
Thank you, Solange. Thank you for those comments and your ideas around outreach. And yes, let's do it. Let's make that happen once we have those draft recommendations. I see Dan and then Linda.
All right, thanks. I just wanted to, I forget who said it, but someone said that after I think it was public comment, and I think one of the committee members said that regarding police, investigating police and the anonymous letter. I just think it's important to note that after that anonymous letter came forward, the department hired an independent investigator to review that incident. And I'm actually looking at a Modesto Bee article dated February 15th of 2012 that outlines the findings of that investigation. And the findings were that the Modesto Police Department did not use excessive force. So there's a lot of things out there saying that we investigate ourselves. In this particular incident, we hired an outside independent person to look into these allegations. So just wanted to share that so that there was no confusion on that topic.
Thanks, Dan. And Linda.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, along with Solange, that Darlene, when you come on, I mean, it's not just when you come on. I think of you all the time, and that kind of situation, I think there, but for the grace of God, go I. So you are primary in my thoughts. And I know I have done studies when I was doing advocacy that there have been a lot of unnecessary deaths, but not within the community, not necessarily the person who had the mental illness itself, but there were enough of those. But whatever the reason and whatever ruling that comes down, it's still a loss of life. And we don't need that. And so I think of you all the time, and all of you who have lost a loved one. And so that's why I'm here and why I'm fighting for you all. So thank you for calling in. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Linda. Absolutely. And so I just want to kind of bring it back. I think it's good. We got to, a lot of people got to respond to some things that are kind of in the air, but just to focus, what I'm taking from this conversation is that we're in alignment on the idea of moving towards draft recommendations as soon as April, if we can do it without compromising, all the steps we need to do to feel confident. And then look towards doing all we can to do outreach to our constituencies, find ways to get out into the community, take the temperature, as Kalua put it, and really bring recommendations forward to the council that we can stand behind and be proud of, and hopefully be in consensus around. So with that, I think we can adjourn or get some final announcements and then wrap up. The ad hoc groups will keep meeting, and we'll come back March 23rd at the Modesto Center Plaza. Again, back to our hybrid format where we'll be in person, and those who need to be on Zoom can. Let's see. So there's going to be some additional dates for the Force Option Simulator experience for anyone who didn't get to participate. So I don't think we have those dates right now, but watch your inbox. You'll get an email to sign up. Ride-alongs are now back. There was a pause for COVID, so I know my ride-along got postponed, but I'm going Monday evening on a ride-along. And Kate, did you have any initial additional announcements?
I just wanted to assure folks that, you know, we continue to remind people that there's the phone number and the website, the email address, other ways for folks to provide their opinions and feedback ongoing. And I've been in conversation with Kalua, and certainly Kalua, you can add anything to this, but we're receiving those. And as promised, the last time I believe we provided any of those comments from the email was in November. So you'll be getting another round of copies of those emails. Kalua, is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, and the other thing we're going to do is for those that come by email, we're going to take the time to redact at least the email address and phone numbers, but the names will be there because it's public information, but to give folks some privacy. But our goal is to put all the comments online. And then we've not gotten a lot of voicemails, but those are actually being transcribed. And so we'll add those as well. So whether you have them in your binder or not, we'll get them up in the next couple of weeks so that they're actually also on the website. And if you guys haven't looked, we've really tried to make it as robust and comprehensive as possible. So presentations are there. The initial staff report back from June, God, it seems like a long time ago, June 8th, when the council actually created Forward Together and kind of launched this initiative. And so and back to kind of to the language, there is actually a translate option on the website. So some of that material can actually be seen in languages other than English, but really invite people to kind of take advantage of all the material. The presentations that you guys have seen are on the website. The data that police and policies and procedures are all there. So really want to invite anyone who's not in the work group who has an interest to spend some time on the website and kind of take a deeper dive and gain a better understanding of some of these issues and some of what the group has been learning. And the next date for the meeting, Kate, is February 23rd. Nope.
Yeah, I was not prepared to unmute myself. Yes, March 23rd.
A
Yes.
month from today, back to hybrid Center Plaza. We don't have the room yet, but we'll be back unless COVID sends us back again. The plan is for us to be more in person than not for the next meeting.
Yes.
And thank you all for all of your hard work. I'm really impressed with the reporting out that the work, the deep dive, the thinking, and the preliminary concepts. It's really exciting, actually. So good job.
I agree. I'm excited too. All right. Thank you, everyone. I think we can adjourn, and we'll see you in the ad hoc meetings and again on March 23rd.